So welcome everyone to our session, When Water Isn't Free. This is all about partnerships designed to build more sustainable wash systems in Nepal. My name is Lindsay Stetcher, and for the past 3 years or so, I've supported Oxfam's Safe Water partnership with the Grundfos Foundation, working alongside our local partners in Nepal as well. So I'm really excited today to come together, virtually albeit, with colleagues from the UK and Nepal and Denmark to talk you through our journey towards creating a new model for managing water systems in rural Nepal. We're really focusing on combating the breakdowns and broken systems that we all so often see in wash projects around the world. Our real goal is to build professionalized systems that keep water flowing both now and in the future, with operating costs covered and systems locally owned. And we do believe our new system management model can achieve this. But we know sustainability is one of the biggest challenges facing the wash sector as a whole. So this is a chance not only for us to share our progress towards solutions in a rural context, but also hopefully to hear from you all about your experiences, challenges, and successes in sustainably providing safe water. So we're going to open with about 15 to 20-minute presentation on an alternative management model for rural water systems that we've been developing in Nepal. That'll be followed by 20 minutes of a panel discussion with myself and all of our partners who I'll introduce shortly. And then the last 20 minutes will be open discussion and questions from all of you. So please, if questions come to mind during the first two portions, please write them in the pathable poll area. So you'll see you can submit specific questions for each speaker. So just submit that as an answer to that poll question. You can also hopefully vote for questions that others have submitted. So we'll then address these in the last portion, but please do use the chat module as well to discuss and reflect on the presentation as we go. As I said before, we'll finish in 1 hour. This is our first session of World Water Week, so please be kind to us with the technical aspects, but hopefully we'll be as seamless as possible. So I'll just quickly introduce our panelists. So Mr. Anjil Adhikari is the thematic lead for Oxfam's water and wash work in Nepal. So he leads all of those initiatives in our country team. He has more than 12 years experience in the wash and disaster risk reduction sectors. And in addition to leading projects, constructing more than 200 water schemes at a time and sharing his expertise through lectures in engineering colleges, for the last 3 years, he has explored solutions to the existing dysfunctionality of rural water supply schemes. So that's why we're all here today.
Hello, everyone.
Anjil, thank you. And I'll move swiftly to Mr. Raj Shatapuli, who is a founding member of Focus Nepal. So that's a long-standing partner of Oxfam in Nepal. And he's been their executive director since 2003. He's got a master's degree in sociology and rural development, but also more than 30 years of hands-on experience in community development. So he's worked with different organizations across many different thematic areas, specifically in rural water supply and sanitation and hygiene, but also in areas like peace building and agriculture value chains. Mr. Raj, if you could say a quick hello, you can come off mute.
Hello, everyone.
Thank you. And Mr. Niels Thorup has been with the Grundfos Foundation as the head of water program for almost 5 years now. Before he joined the foundation, he'd been working for Grundfos, the company, which is the largest pump manufacturer in the world, hence, of course, the interest in water, for more than 20 years in the fields of environment, business development, research, and innovation. So one of the main focuses of the Grundfos Foundation, and as such, one of the main focuses of Niels and his work with us, is to make resilient water systems truly sustainable. So Niels, if you could say a quick hello.
Hello, everyone.
Thank you. And I myself head up new partnerships with foundations at Oxfam Great Britain, the NGO that works fighting poverty in countries around the world. And while leading Oxfam's partnership with the Grundfos Foundation, I've also worked on exploring new markets-based wash models in both Nepal and Kenya. So that's the panelists, and you'll hear more from us later. But now I'm going to pass directly to Anjil to start the presentation. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Lindsay. Namaste, everyone, again. So I'm here to share my brief experience on our journey towards an alternative management model. This will be an exploration of our sustainable solutions for the rural water supply systems in Nepal. So back in 2014, Nepal government did a study on functionality of rural water supply systems. It was identified then that out of 100% schemes, only 75% of the schemes were, needed repairs. and only 25% of them were functioning well. That means that all the effort that was invested in building the access of rural water supply systems was going in vain, because 75% of them were kind of, like at the stage of either needing a minor repairs or major repairs. Exactly a year and a half after that, there was a big earthquake in Nepal. Hundreds and hundreds of water supply schemes were either completely destroyed or were left in a stage where it needed to be reconstructed or rehabilitated. Oxfam, as a development partner and like a development partner in Nepal, had a mandate to construct some of those schemes. We had to decide if we wanted to continue constructing schemes right away and be a part of that 75% and leave it again, like leave it unattended after a few years, or we step back and then really understand why the systems were breaking in the first place. We chose the second one. We decided to step back and then really see why these systems were breaking. That's when we went to the field. We dive deeper into understanding these complexities of rural water supply systems to really understand why these systems were breaking in the first place. There were different challenges, that caused systems to not function well. But in a nutshell, we identified three bigger issues that was kind of, taking a major role in in causing system to dysfunction after a few years of construction. Typically, in the schemes in hilly areas or even in flatlands, Terai, which is the southern belt of Nepal, sharing border with India. So in these areas, the problem was typically with the tariff. In Nepal, often the water is thought as free, and it is kind of taking some time for community to understand that flowing water might be free, but it takes cost to bring water from the flowing river to the household. And so typically in these communities, there is less practice of having a reasonable and scientific tariff. And in some communities, there is no practice of having tariff as well. And even in the places where there is tariff in place, the frequency of tariff collection is a bit poor. So because of these factors, we identified that these schemes do not typically have that strong amount of income that's required to sustain the system. On the other side, it is identified that these schemes typically have huge expenses, whether it is a scheme of 20 households or it's a scheme of 200 or 800 households. There are basic expenses that are bound to happen, like a technician required in a scheme, an accountant required, or someone to collect, like read the meters. All of these expenses are required, whether it's a 800 household scheme or 220 household schemes. Further, development agencies had a practice of involving communities in pipe laying as a part of community building ownership. We identified that this practice in long run is actually creating a more burden in expenses, because communities were not laying the pipe as deeper as they should have. And in long run, it's recreating, like reoccurring expenses. And as a result, the expenses is higher. So typically these rural areas schemes, if they run out of funds, they organize a meeting, mass meeting, and then tend to ask more funds from the community if they run out of funds. But sometimes all may not have funds to contribute, and then that scheme remains unrepaired for months and months. And that's how the system goes dysfunctional after, even after some big amount of investment. The third issue was governance. Water user committees are, a simple community members who are formed as a group after a scheme is constructed, and then train them through pre-construction and post-construction trainings. And then we give them some trainings to really build the capacity to manage the system. Technically, it is seen that for the first year one and year two, they are kind of happy to manage the system, because the system will or may not have, may have very less breakdowns. But once the system starts to have, bigger breakdowns, they do not have technical capacity to really, deal with those issues. They do not have culture of inspecting these schemes in regular, regular time. So all of these tend to break the system very frequently. And once the system starts breaking frequently, the committee lose confidence over the user committee. And since the user committee themselves are a volunteers group, we have seen that often this becomes the second priority. And in many places, the water user committees do not have the knowledge of accountability. And as a result, the financial transactions record are very poor. Also, because the water user committees are, just a volunteers group, in many places it's seen that water user committee are just a step to build someone's career in politics. So as a result, water user committees' interest to manage the system gradually falls down. So that's when we realized if we want to build a system that's going to work, we need to change how it's being managed. That's when we started talking about the alternative management model. Before I jump into the model, let me give you a brief scenario of how it's being operated today. So you can see here these clusters. These are water user committees and water users. So these water user committees and water users, they tend to manage the whole systems. All the tariffs, if there is culture of tariff collection, sorry, if there is the culture of tariff collection, then these water user committee has to collect the tariff, and then they keep the record if they have that practice. And if there is any system breakdown which is beyond their capacity, then that's when they go to the rural municipality. There is no such provision of water supply board or any sort of financial institutions and then payment mechanisms today in the system. What we are trying to do here is a bit different. I'll walk you through all stakeholders that are a part of our model so that it's a bit clear. So let me start with the rural municipality. Rural municipality is the municipal head of the municipality, and he or she will be monitoring the quality of work that water supply management, rural water supply management board will be doing. And then at the same time, he or she will also look into the possibility of managing the budget for repair and maintenance or providing construction support in expansion of the system. That will be the major role of rural municipality. Not shown in the model, but there will be some support from the national government. There will also be some support from the provincial government when we are testing the model. The second important stakeholder in the model is the Water Supply Management Board. The Water Supply Management Board is and will be a permanent structure in the rural municipal level, but yet with full capacity to expand beyond the municipality. They will be main lead to manage all systems. The roles currently envisioned is A, to expand the system, B, to inspect the system, C, to repair and maintain the system, and then to manage the financials and assets of the system. So overall, the rural water supply management board will have to manage the entire system. And the other one is the service sector. This is where we have envisioned the possibility of a service provider. This is introduced to make the management of water supply easier, but at the same time more transparent and more accountable. As you can see, once these platforms are introduced, the users will be able to use the mobile platform to pay all the water related bills easily by their phone. This is happening for the first time maybe in the rural areas. And secondly, if there are people who cannot use mobile phones to pay the bills, the service sector with whom we are partnering, they will set up the agents in those areas who will help them do the payment. So in that way, we are using service sector for digital payment mechanism, setting up digital platform. Secondly, we are setting up a centralized financial management for all the schemes in rural areas. So that means all the schemes in the rural areas whose tracks of income and expenses is never made in today's date, we will have a complete and proper auditable format financial recording of all those schemes. And the third role that service sector will provide us is the IT platform, which will be mostly for complaint feedback mechanisms. Every time a user has identified an issue in the system, he or she will be now able to raise the complaint, and the ticket will be generated and informed to the board, and the board will then send his or like the plumbers from their department to address the problem. And once the problem is resolved, the issue is closed. I mean, the ticket is closed, and that's how it's clearly notable how strongly or how efficiently the service is being functioned. And the other one will be these water users. And the point to note is that water user committees, we do not want to like dismantle water user committee right away from day two. We want them to be at least still have a representation mostly from the community to really raise the voice if it's necessary. So this represents the water users who will be the core beneficiary or core recipient of the service. So to make it easier, if I am the water user, then I will be like using my mobile phones to pay the tariff based on what the meter reader tells me. And once I pay the tariff, it will go to the Water Supply Management Board's account. They will have that record, and then I'll also receive an SMS that I've paid the tariff for the month. And then if there are any complaints that I have to make, I will use an application to raise the complaint, and then that will again go back to the board. And based on that, the board will send the plumbers to completely resolve the issue. And once it's resolved, then the ticket will be closed. And all the tariffs being collected will be centrally collected at the board, and the board will have complete authority to manage the finances. And they will have complete authority to manage the finances. And if there is any gaps that's not been able to like fulfill from the amount of money collected from tariff, that's when the rural municipality will allocate the budget for them. And in this whole alternative management model, I have personally been always questioned about the need of service provider. Why do we need service provider in the first place? Are we actually bringing service provider because there is a trend of having service providers in everything, or do we see some benefits? That's when we did some financial analysis, and we came up with this conclusion that yes, having service provider in our model actually makes benefit. Yeah. So just by introducing online payment platform, and through centralized and outsourced management of accounting financials, we're actually saving 28 to 33% of gross margin in hills, which is a good amount of money in such situation when we are like hardly hitting break even. And the important part here now in the whole process, so this is a simple example of what's alternative management model and why do we see future in that. But having said that, I think it's very important to share with you all what has been our journey. When we started this back like a few years ago, there were some concerns, and we started it as a project. We wanted to like in a year or two find a solution, but then we realized sustainability is a journey and it cannot be a project. That's when we started saying that it's a process, and process takes time. Process has a learning, and process has to have an adaptive approach. Back in those days when we were starting the work right away, we had some like key resistance in our mind. We had some questions. Would we be able to find the solutions? Like our biggest concern was it's fine that we have a model in place, but will we be able to find the exact type of service provider who would provide us the type of rules we are looking for? We were also we were struggling to see, would the water user committee agree to like leave their responsibility. I mean, they might leave their roles, but sometimes the socio-political dynamics plays a very strong role in community. So in that case, in those schemes where the areas where it's highly political, would the water user committee be able to like really hand over the schemes? And one of the biggest concerns that we have at our end was regarding the centralized management system. As fancy as it sounds, having a centralized management system where all the schemes, financials coming in a single dashboard that in a click you can see it. It sounds fancy, but again, setting up it is like expensive, and sometimes it's really time consuming. And behavior change. Yes, our model seems interesting, but would we be able to really impress the community or bring ownership to them? These were some bigger resistance that we had in our mind. And today, as I'm presenting you all, I can proudly say that we have been able to break through this resistance. We have found a service provider who can deliver exactly the same type of roles that we are expecting. We have been mobilizing human resources together with our partners in the ground, really inform them what alternative management means, what we are trying to change, that it's not just, like repairing system, it's, scheme, but it's really changing a system. So, and then we acknowledged that, the community have a different level of understanding, they come from different horizons. So it takes time. So we have accepted that it takes time for community to understand the gravity of work, and we realized today that they have actually been able to do so. And the interesting part is the service provider we found have, like a biggest footprint in digital platform in Nepal, and locally they have a sister organization who have centralized. We have already set up a centralized management system for finances in water supply. They are focused only on urban areas, but they have agreed to work with us in rural areas. We will be doing some, like minor upgrades in those systems to really feature with our model. But the interesting part is the amount of money that we should have invested in building the whole system, and the time is highly cut off. That means we are, like we have almost saved a year now. And interestingly, the water user committees are actually willing to be a part of a model. They want to be a part of a model because they know that, like they have taken a bit of a huge burden by, just taking the responsibility of managing the schemes that breaks frequently. So then we clearly understood that from maybe after a year, that we should look this as a process and be very adaptive in every move we make. But the point is that we had a clear vision from day one on where we wanted to go. If you look at the road, so this is the roadmap I developed 2 or 3 years ago. We had a very clear plan on where do we want to go. So back in 2017-18, when we started the exploration, we were very clear that if we do not know the problems of these schemes and start working on it from, like sky, it's not going to go anywhere. So we spent few months in the community to really understand the problems. And based on those problems, we developed our models. And those models also went through a lot of iterative processes. There is an interesting story that we have changed the models many times, even from the feedbacks of community. It's very rare that a group of community come together with an observation in our model and then say, oh, look, this is a problem in your model, I think it needs to be changed, which I really appreciated. And that's a big example that how with time community can have ownership in the system. And then after we build the model, we had to, like go through a bigger challenge of really identifying private sector. We had identified a private sector back in 2018, 2019, but then COVID happened. And the company, which was all set up to work with us, bankrupted because of extremely long lockdown. That's when we had to restart exploring the new service provider. And then it took us a year and a half. And despite the impact of COVID, we have been able to identify a new service provider who exactly matches with our need. And then we are currently upgrading the systems. We are in the process of doing an agreement with the rural municipality, and then final agreement with the rural municipality. And then currently we are upgrading the schemes who will be a part of the management model, because if the systems are already technically very poor, it cannot function well. And interestingly, most of the schemes that we are currently upgrading, there is a matching fund by the rural municipality, which is a strong example that the rural municipality echo very much with what we are trying to do. There is also a very positive message towards us from the National Department of Water Supply that they're interested to partner with us in this model in years to come. So this is one of the, possibly one of the strong achievement that we have made, that government is very positive about this model, and they're happy to see and support us in building this model further. Currently, we are here. We are in the stage of building a business plan for the municipality, because each schemes have their own income and expenses. We really want to see what's the financial status of these schemes before we jump with the final conclusion. We want to see what would be the expenses of the board to really make it run. And so we are currently doing financial analysis of all these schemes. So we have around 100 to 120 schemes in one rural municipality that will be bundled together for now. And then each scheme financial analysis will give us the total income that we will be receiving and total expenses that we might have. And that will give us a clear picture of what is the amount of money that the rural municipality needs to invest to keep systems running. And our plan is to really reduce the amount of fund that the government has to spend in years to come. And after we move forward, the important part is, after this is ready, that's when we'll start launching the model. But when I say launching the model, it means we will have set up a board in the community and we will have plumbers in place. The plumbers will be mobilized, but what we don't really know is how many plumbers will be required, because in hills, sometimes when there is rainy season, monsoon area, many places may not be accessible. So how would we, solve that problem? That's when we will be, simulating and re-simulating the model. That's where we will be collecting, we will be use sensors to really collect the data. When system breaks down, what type of breakdown happens, how longer it takes for someone to really break the, track the records, to fix the system, to fix the records. So after 2 or 3 years, we'll have enough data for the system to retell us that where the system is likely to break down, what type of breakdown typically happens. By doing that, we will gradually be correcting those mistakes, and then we will be, gradually minimizing those technical errors as well. So after a few years, then we will know what exactly number of plumbers are required. All plumbers may not be required throughout the year. They might just be required for a few months, and then less may be required in summer. So that will help us to really save money and then find out that exact and more efficient model that could work. And after that's built and it's fully functional, that we will start, building its scale. We are trying to scale it at the municipal level, but it's open to go beyond the municipal level, because the government policy has given the authority for the rural municipality to lease out this management to any other service providers as well. So that opens up that arena, and then we can move forward with the scale. So management model that's working fully functional is our vision. And we are very confident that in few years we will reach here. And the strong factor that has always drive us here is our belief that providing water to community is a pious job. We echo with what John F. Kennedy said: anyone who can solve problems of water will be worthy of 2 Nobel Peace Prize, one for peace and one for science. In all our journey, the strongest takeaway that we have had is that sustainability is a process. It is not a project. If we think it is a project, we will fix our approach. We'll be very rigid. But once we understand it's a process, we are very open to it. We take it as a live engagement, and we are always open and changing approaches. And that has been probably the best thing in this project. So this is all I have at the moment. Thank you. Over to you, Lindsay.
Thank you, Anjal. Really appreciate you running through all the complexity of that model. And I know firsthand that it's been a long process, and one that you said has required trust and trying new things. And I think the overarching message that I take away is how crucial the partnerships we've had have helped make this happen. So both with the Grundfos Foundation in Denmark, and with all of our local partners in Nepal, with Focus Nepal being one example in the Dading district of Nepal. So what I'd really like the panel to talk about is to pick up on some of these themes, Anjal, that you've talked about, the importance of putting the community at the center, but also the real on-the-ground management struggles that have happened in years past, and how this is really new for both the local government, for the community. There's many different stakeholders that work in this management model. So we'll talk a little bit about the local government's input and experience into this. We'll also really talk about what is this meant for flexible funding? How do we run a timeline of a project? How do we know and set goals when things are changing all the time? And how do we do that in a really trusted partnership scenario? And when we talk about trust, it's really the trust that the community has in us that's the most important, because they've been the ones who've suffered so long when systems don't work and when different projects have happened that have had short-term goals, but not really taken the time to look at these core problems. So I remember a couple of years ago, there was a point where we stopped construction for 6 months. And in many other projects, that would feel like a crisis or a failure, why we stopped going forward for 6 months. But it was because we'd made the decision that there were certain aspects of involving the community and certain aspects of understanding the current problems that we hadn't really hit yet. So we needed to have those conversations first. So it's been a real pleasure for me, and I know all my colleagues at Oxfam as well, both past and present, to get to work on a project that's really focused on these long-term goals. So what I'll do is facilitate a bit of conversation with the panel. And then I think I've got my colleague Sarah behind the scenes managing the questions that you've got coming in. So please keep putting them in on the polls if you have them. And we've got about half an hour left, so we'll do our best with time management.
Can I just jump in and ask that you put questions in the Pathable platform rather than on Zoom? Thank you.
Yeah, there should be a poll option, but if you put it in the chat as well, that can work. So the first theme I want to talk about really is those kind of struggles that have existed on the ground and the real importance that the community plays in all of this. So Raj, if I could ask you the first question that I've got, you've seen the struggles to manage the rural water supply at local level for decades in the area of Nepal you're working in. In your perspective, what are the greatest community needs, and how do you see this alternative management model that Anjal's just walked us through? How do you think it could be an important game changer or an important step change at the local level? What excites you about this model?
Thank you. Actually, as a partner of Oxfam in Nepal to implement this project, and based on our experience, the local government had to allocate a big portion of budget to repair the drinking water supply system in rural area. This is the main challenge, and it's a kind of burden for them. And also development partners, including government agencies and NGOs, also the private sector. So they are also struggling to find the solution. What can do in the rural water supply system management here? And the alternative management model, the system now, what we are dreaming is a specialized autonomous structure in municipal level, that is drinking water supply system management board, that we call board for that. So under local government, and this will be one of the opportunity that can take responsibility for service regulation, maintenance, and service extension as well, through engaging service provider as necessary. Similarly, the bundling the schemes and similar management costs shared by multiple schemes can reduce the expenses for the water users and the overall water system in rural area. And easy and accessible tariff payment system that we are developing the digital platform for the payment system. It will reduce the cost and it will make it easy for the users. Similarly, the service provider, the technical service provider, they will get the attractive salary for maintenance so that they can deliver their service effectively in the rural area. So this is how we are observing here in the ground that this is the process of struggle since the development process started in Nepal. So 1956. It was the first priority was water supply was the first priority in the beginning, and now it's in the priority one issues for the development. And concerning the question, so the local government, what we are looking there is they are facing challenges like I already mentioned, the burden to allocate the budget in the repairment. And again, the local governments, they are not assured on utilizing the resources properly by the users due to many reasons, like they don't have adequate technical knowledge for repair and maintenance in the rural area. And also local government, they don't have such kind of technical human resources with them that they can use everywhere, anytime. This kind of human resources are not with them. So the main gap with them is the users committee, which works voluntarily, they are not stable always, because according to the rules, they have to change their governing bodies by 2-3 years, and they are always unstable. And similarly, another problem is the adequate technical knowledge, financial and information management, proper utilization of resources, availability of skilled human resource, and mobilization mechanism are some of the issues of local government and the local system. So now, when we started the alternative management model in the rural area, the local government now, they are convinced on the rural drinking water supply system management board formation process, and now they are very excited for its final structure. And now they are engaging in the discussion of alternative management system in local level, and they are excited to apply this proposed model. And for this process, in this process, rural municipalities, now they are collaborating with the alternative management model for the repair and maintenance process, so that the board can take over it easily in the days to come.
So that sounds like, just to jump in there, because I think you've picked up on a few important points about the length of time that these types of problems have been looked at, mentioning from 1956 onwards, looking at water as an important priority within Nepal. But obviously, the fact that we've had to go back again and again with similar projects year after year, or the fact that perhaps the government is still spending a lot of money on really capital investments and systems that don't work, and that water user committees don't have the training, or service providers don't have the income. I think what you're talking about is the complexity of the problems, and how a model like this that looks complex itself is needed to address all those different aspects. I'd be interested, Nils, to hear from you, of course, as the head of water at Grundfos Foundation. You work in so many other countries, and we're talking about the Nepalese context today, but I think we see a lot of the same problems like this all around the world. So, what's been your experience of the greatest challenge when it comes to implementing rural water supplies and what you've done at the foundation?
Yeah, what we see is that the biggest challenge is actually to make real water systems, to make them really sustainable. And it's not just for years, it's not just for decades, but it should be for generations. So it means that, and Angel said that we are not making projects, but we are trying to make a process. So it means that we need to go back to the projects we have had to ensure that they are still in function, not only after 2 years, but also 5, 10, 15 years if it's needed. So that's the most important thing, is to make truly sustainable projects.
And I think that word sustainable is really important, because it can mean so many different things. And Angela, I know we've talked about how sustainable hardware and sustainable tech is important, and obviously that's where Grundfos comes in, the likes of some of the solar water systems that we've looked at. But Angela, when you think about systems thinking, And that's what's different about this model. How does this go beyond hardware to focus on that wider sustainability? And specifically with the financial modeling you've talked about, how has that been important to building your model? Because it's weird to talk so much about financial modeling sometimes when we're so used to talking about pumps.
Thank you, Lindsay. So when we are saying the word system, typically talking about this model, we are not actually talking about the technical system. I think it's something we need to be very clear. It's not just the pipes and taps we're talking about. Everything that is needed to keep a system running, along with its administrative, financials, socials, and even policy level support. That's what we are looking into in this alternative management model when we are talking about system thinking, right? So let me be a bit specifically about this particular model, that how we are looking system thinking in this model. In this model, we are talking about making a system sustainable. That means, we are starting with hardware, like Ekrajji said, that we are already working with government to really upgrade the quality of system, because we know if the system itself, the technical system itself is not working, then none of the thing is going to work, right? If at the end of the day the source depletes, that the entire model is going to collapse. So it's very important that technicality has to be there. But again, once there is technicality, we are also parallelly looking into re-engineering the existing stakeholders. I always like to give a metaphorical example of tuning the soundboard. There are so many sticks in the soundboard. You can tune one on the right side and then really see if the sound is accurate. And if you don't find it accurate, you have to kind of change the other tune. So it's like tuning it, and you have to tune it multiple times here and there until you find that exact correct quality sound that you're actually looking for. So that exactly happens in the system thinking here as well. We have so many stakeholders engaged. It's a local government, it's a water user committees, it's the service providers, it's development organizations like Oxfam, Focus Nepal, NGOs, and small community users as well. And there are so many political aspects, that needs to be balanced. So we are looking at all of these factors in this project. For example, we are even looking at, if we are collecting the tariff, there will be difficulty for users to, walk 30 minutes downhill to really pay $1 bill. So we are setting up a digital platform system. We're talking about centralized financial management system, so we are looking at the bigger picture, right? So that's, I think, is how widely we're looking at our sustainability aspect. And a good example is we are going to collaborate very soon with the national government as well in water supply. So I mean, Department of Water Supply, which is another good example of, how broadly we are looking at in terms of sustainability. And I'm glad you asked about the financial modeling. I think it's very, very important aspect is in a specific, this model, because to speak in bullet points, one of the important part of financial modeling is to really understand the financial status of these schemes, individual schemes. So if until unless we know which scheme is in profit and which is in loss, it's really hard to pitch them why they should be a part of the model. Secondly, it helps us to know the affordability of the tariff among the users, because our aim is to make sure that water is accessible for everyone. So affordability, it becomes a bigger issue, and we are taking the financial modeling as a part of that. Third one is, by knowing the financial modeling, we exactly know what will be the gap between tariff collected from the community and that's actually needed to operate the model. And that gap needs to be filled by the local government. So we then know what's the percentage of the amount that's needed to be injected by the rural municipality. So these are the core, core points that I think is very strongly important when we talk about financial modeling.
Great.
Over to you, Lindsay. Thank you.
And I think Sarah's messaged me that we have some good questions coming in from the audience. So I'll try to make sure we have at least 10 minutes for that. I knew there'd be too many things to talk about, but I just want to talk really quickly about that point about the different parts of the model and the different stakeholders, and how having everyone on board with the data to show them why this is a model that works is really important. Nils, this is quite a different approach than a lot of standard WASH projects. How, from your side as our funding partner and our technical partner, how did this alternative management model from Oxfam and all the other aspects that Angel's talking about find space or come to be in the project that you were working on us with?
I think it's very important to understand that sitting behind a desk in Denmark doesn't make me an expert in how to implement things out there. I normally say it's very easy to install a pump drill a borehole, install a pump, connect it to the pipe. It's the soft things who is really hard in projects. And it will vary from country to country, from culture to culture. So that's why it is so important that we work so close together with the local NGOs, because they are the real expert. I don't necessarily understand how a Nepalese farmer is thinking. So this is the crucial thing for us, is to learn from you guys, because you're the real experts.
And I think that's so important, that we all know we're bringing different things to the table, but that they complement each other. But I really enjoyed the model that we work on this project with, where we have steering committee meetings every month or as often as we need. And it's a really open forum to talk about what the problems are, what solutions might be. And it really is the more flexible way that gives more space to different voices. And speaking of different voices, Ekraj, I want to come back to you as well, because obviously, you know, Focus Nepal has been well established in Dading for so many years, and Oxfam has worked with you for many years. And I know that you've worked with other, you know, large international NGOs who play this role both in the different countries we work in, but also based here in the UK. What has been really important for you about the role of an international NGO like Oxfam in working with you on this model? You know, how has the approach to project management and timelines been important? What's been your experience of working with all of us on something different like this?
Yeah, thank you, Anji. I think it's an opportunity for local NGO like Focus Nepal having partnership with INGO like Oxfam for funding, technical backstopping, managerial and institutional development process. It's a support from that side. And the another is the local NGO like Focus can play the effective role for mobilizing local resources and management of the project activities in local level, and collaboration, coordination with local government and local agencies in local level. While an INGO like Oxfam can play the role of coordination in national level as well as international level to import new ideas and resources, as well as it can open the door for new partnership. So, and to implement such an innovative project, in your last concern, so we have an understanding for flexibility on approach, time and budget, because we are learning by doing in ground based on the local context, local role of local government and stakeholders and others like-minded organizations there. So it's a very important to have a partnership with the INGO for local organization like Focus Nepal.
If I can build on that question, because I think that point about you being on the ground and close to the community is really important. It's come up earlier. How important for you has the element of trust and communication with, you know, the local government, the local community been? Because I think that's really at the core of this project. So what's been your experience of the community conversations?
This is the main things. I think this is the backbone. So only on trust of the local community and local government, we can work in community and we can make change there. So this is the main things, and we are adopting in this project as well.
Thank you. Yeah, there's so many other things that I want to talk about. And I know the project well, so I can't imagine how everyone else is feeling. Let's move the last 10 minutes to some of the questions coming in from all of you. I think the one that Sarah's just sent me would make sense to ask Angel. So I'll start with you again, back in the hot seat. You mentioned a bit about the tariffs and the gap between the cost to run the system and the tariff, because obviously people still have limited income in many of these places, and the tariff has to be reasonable. I know that's important to the model. What happens, this is the question coming in from the audience, what happens if people can't pay for the water that's produced through the model? Will water be turned off right away for them? You know, what's the plan with that affordability aspect?
Yes, thank you. Thank you so much. So I think that is always a bigger challenge everywhere, because culturally also in context of Nepal, it's ethically very wrong to not give someone water, right? And if someone, you know, do not pay tariff, so the problem of not paying tariff will always be limited to a very small number of community or houses once it starts, you know, like rapidly moving forward. There is always this, like early starters and then laggers, So in our case, if there are households, they will not pay tariff. What we have done in few communities and has worked is giving a social pressure, because we cannot completely cut off the system. It becomes a bit difficult, because once you start cutting off system, they will start, like breaking pipes here and there, and that actually affects the whole system. So our plan is that we will initiate the social pressure, and to confirm you that we have done this in few areas and it has worked. But again, it may not work in every places, but it has worked in some of the places. Like for example, the local government might really, like stop some of their governmental works unless they make those payments properly, or the names are often like pasted in the local government ward if the payments are due for a very longer period of time. But if the issue is, if they are not paying because they cannot pay, that's a different story. In that case, there is always the scheme of subsidy that will come from the local government, so that we can ease them in paying the tariff. But if it's intentional and not paying it, that will go through a social pressure. Thank you.
And I think you tried, I remember there was a period where we tried many different marketing models to have people buy in. And I think the other important point is the scale and the bundling of the systems, which makes those tariff affordable, because it just isn't cost effective, we know, for the service provider to come in for one small rural scheme, and then the tariffs will be too high. So I think a lot of factors come in there. I just want to read a comment that came in from Matthias Saladin, who said, it looks like you concluded that the main cause of low functionality of these networks are technological nature, so that they're breaking down and we're not repairing them. In his experience, it's much more about perceptions, expectations, and priorities of the users, thus the soft factors that we're talking about, and to some extent about the local capacities that we talked about, the municipalities' resources and everything else. If you or anyone else deliver a service that is perceived as high quality, payments will come in and people will find ways to solve the technical problems even without the sophisticated IT solutions. But the fact that you assign a rural municipality a key role is a strength of your model, and I think there's a lot of potential there. So I think Matthias is making a few different points there, but there's also that important one about what's the role of IT and how far do we go with that. But I think the perceptions of the community, and we've talked a bit less about it here, but if I can kind of speak for the project team, I know that the community involvement and the community trust has been one of the most important aspects, and trying different ways to communicate the benefits of the model, whether it's with local politicians, whether it's word of mouth, whether it's testing water quality, has been really important for that buy-in. So I just wanted to bring in that bit from the conversation. We've got a question from David Walter. He says, in my experience, one huge problem of rural water supply systems is intermittent operation. Example, due to limited water availability during the dry season or deficits within operation and maintenance. During intermittent operation, the system is running empty and water is often distributed unfairly, I assume because there's not enough. Who's next to the source often gets more water than people at the end of the scheme. This often leads to conflicts between the users. And I think that point about peace that John F. Kennedy mentioned is relevant there. And sometimes illegal manipulation of infrastructure and hence increased water losses. Did you have experiences like that as well when you were identifying the problems of rural water supply in Nepal, and how did you address them? So did you have that problem of intermittent operation and supply?
Yeah, can you please repeat it? My internet got disturbed for like 10 seconds. So can you please repeat it?
Just when you were identifying the problems in the rural water supply system, did you find that intermittent operation of the systems due to limited water availability was one of the problems, and that sometimes led to an unfair distribution? So people closer to the source of the scheme taking more water, or sometimes illegal manipulation of the water infrastructure, which I think might mean siphoning off different aspects. Did you come across any of those issues where there was less water available because the system wasn't functioning well?
Yes, thank you. Yes, definitely there are. I think we found several such issues. It's mostly seen in the hilly areas where the houses near to the source, or let's say the distribution tanks, they get enough pressure to, enough head to get proper water. But as you move farther end of the network, they often, may not get proper water. So we did face those. We did find such a scheme. It's very common in hills, and I totally agree with the point that it needs to be changed, because that typically reduces the interest to pay tariff and be a part of the model. Yeah.
Great, thank you. I've got a question from Deepak Guwali. I'm not sure, Deepak, if you can come off mute perhaps to answer your question, because I want to do it justice, and I think there's a few elements there. If you feel comfortable coming off mute, I'll give you a second. But if not, I'm happy to read it out.
Well, I put it down in the question, the chat box. But one of the problems has been the intermittent supplies already mentioned, but the spring sources on which all these water supply systems are dependent, the spring sources are drying up, and it has nothing to do with climate change as yet. It will, but not as yet. As yet, the drivers are mostly coming from the social mismanagement of technology, over pumping, and a few other details, changing social mores, including abandonment of livestock keeping. That means recharge ponds are being filled up and not recharging water. So there's a whole lot of things, but my main question had to do with this public and common pool aspect of drinking water, which others have also mentioned. And I think Anjil kind of mentioned that it is also a human rights issue. So how far would the model that you have put forth answer these questions of social justice? I guess that's broadly how I'm seeing it.
Yeah. So if I understood your question correctly, are we talking about providing equal access of water to everyone?
Oh, just even access. Equal is a separate issue afterwards.
Okay. So one of the aim that we have is, inspect that possibility through the board, because one of the roles that we are giving the board is building, increasing the access, or, expanding the networks to the areas where they don't have access to water. And we have found that there are two things to consider in this point. One is, if we look solely part of the income, solely part of the construction costs, sometimes there are communities who are living very in a very different zone, different area, and like 5 or 7 households, and building a separate system for them becomes very costlier. So in that case, what we are discussing with the government is that in such areas that needs to be heavily subsidized. Otherwise the normal rate of tariff will not be able to sustain those specific schemes. For example, I can give you example in Gorkha. Like recently we found our households around 10 to 15 20 households, which the cost of really building that scheme is 10 or 20 times more than what you would do in normal cases. So in that case, if you look at from an economic perspective, the government may not invest in that, and rather invest in the areas where there are more voters and the more people with the same amount of money. So in that case, what we are talking with the government is that there should be an equal access for everyone in the rural municipality that will be managed by the board. But again, I think we need to see how it moves forward as we implement it. Thank you.
Thank you. There's a few more questions, but I'm not sure we'll get to them because we have 60 seconds left according to my clock. And I think that the platform that we're working on might sort of kick us out after. So I should probably wrap up rather than cut anyone off. But I should say that this has been recorded and can be shared afterwards. And the PowerPoint that Anjil presented will be up on our World Water Week page, so you can download that and access that. And I'm sure, I think, that the chat might be open after this. So if you have any questions that didn't get answered, we'd be happy to connect over email or even a call. I know Anjil and Raj have wide networks within Nepal themselves. Many people and organizations they work with that me and Niels won't know directly ourselves. So if you're looking for connections on the ground or would like to hear more about the model, they're there as well. So yes, please return to our page if you need any of the other aspects or if you want to keep the conversation going. I just want to thank all of you here, Anjal, Ekraj, Nils. It's always a pleasure working with all of you. And I know we could talk about this much longer. So thank you for sharing some tidbits. And thank you for everyone who commented and asked questions.